Happy Thursday and welcome to another edition of Kayak Fishing Weekly, the show on the Serious Angler Network dedicated to all things kayak fishing. I'm your host, Justin Largen. Thanks for tuning in. Got a fun show planned for you. Before I introduce our guests and we talk some springtime fishing and kind of jump into the recent Rayburn tournament, I want to talk a little bit of news. We are a week and a half or so away from the first Bassmaster Kayak Series event of the season. So I'm pretty stoked for that. I want to say there's 180 folks signed up for that tournament already. It's going to be on Lake Murray in South Carolina. I think we're going to be hitting it at a really good time. Should be a bunch of different ways to catch fish. I'm excited about that. And I suspect we're going to get pretty close to 200, if not over that. So it should be a fun derb down in a couple of weeks. That's going to be the 24th and 25th of February. So right around the corner. Not this weekend, but the following weekend. So I'm looking forward to that. Also, we just had our second Hobie stop of the year on Sam Rayburn. So we'll jump into some more specifics of that here in a minute. But just to go over the highlights, it's a field of just under 100 anglers, and the winner, Mr. Philip Wyatt, congrats to him. He put up 186 inches over two days to go back to back on Rayburn. That's something that has not happened very often in any of the circuits, to my knowledge. Jody Queen comes to mind on the Susquehanna a couple of years back. But for anybody that doesn't know, Philip won the tournament back in the fall on Rayburn, who won again this past weekend. So congrats to him. Impressive showing. In second place, Guillermo Gonzalez had a real strong first day, battled back the second day. He put up 181 inches, 181 and 3/4. And then Jeff Isham, 175 and 3/4 to take third place. And we'll jump into, again, some more of that Texas tournament stuff here in a minute. But first, I want to introduce our guest. He's a tournament angler. He's been very dominant. That may be an understatement in the kayaking scene in Arkansas. He's competed on the national trails for a number of years, since well before I started. Bunch of top finishes, Hobie TOC qualifications, Bassmaster Championship berths. He's got a national win in the Bassmaster Kayak Series, and he's been an AOY contender on the Bassmaster Series over the last few years. He's taken my money more than a few times. Without further ado, Garrett G Money Morgan.
Hey,
Garrett,
thanks for having me, man. Hey, you've taken some of my money too, so it's gone back and forth.
As long as it stays between us. It's
Yeah.
I appreciate you joining me. First off, congrats on your finish down on Rayburn. You were one of the ones I was kind of predicting to have a good tournament. Anything down in that Arkansas, Texas region, you've done very well.
Yeah, I had some high hopes going into it. Had a really good practice. February in Texas, I seem to, just really be able to find them and find my stride early when we have events there. So I was glad to kick the season off with a good start. Like I said, I had a really good practice. Day one didn't go as just the way I wanted to, but day two ended up being a lot better for me.
You got them on. You got on pretty early, if I remember right. Solid, 80 some inches pretty early. At least when I first tuned in, you were already kind of up towards the top of the standings that first day.
Yeah, I'd say that early morning bite was pretty good on day one. And, this is fishing. Everybody has this happen. Disappointing thing about day one is my biggest fish was 21 and a half. And I had a fish coming to the kayak bigger than that one. And I end up losing it. If I fish clean, maybe there's a chance that I'm finishing a little higher as well. But I think that also kept me in an area a lot longer than I probably should have been on day one, because, oh man, there was, a giant fish around here. I've caught one that was 21 and a half. And I think I really just, for the rest of the day, just hammered that spot out. And even started there day two, right on that tree where I had lost that big fish, hoping it was there. Never got another glimpse of it or another big bite.
Yeah, you never know though. Like it's, you never know if she's going to be there, or I
Yeah.
guess the odds aren't great, but you don't know until you try. And
I've had it happen both ways. There was an event on Conway, and it was running through my mind while I was fishing this weekend. that I won last year, the All-American Kayak Series, stopped here in Conway. And I went by a tree earlier in the day, and I ended up losing one. It was like 17 inches or so. And this was on day one of that tournament. And so I fished around, pecked around, went back towards the ramp on the other side of the lake where there was a protected cove, just trying to fill a limit, man. I ended up with 3 fish at I think it was like 1:30 or so. And so I'm like, well, the fish should be setting up to spawn. That fish is going to spawn on that cypress tree. I'm going to go back and see if that fish is there. And I go back and, flip up there. I catch a fish, and it looked like it was 17 inches or so. And I was looking at it, I was like, man, there's a chance there might be a female up there. I don't think this is just a big male. And all in one motion, because we can't hold on to fish and kayak fishing. I get my bait ready, re-rig it, and I'm like, I'm gonna kind of toss this fish out towards the middle of the lake because he's gonna run back to the bed. Now I can't see because the water's dirty, but I know there's a bed on the cypress tree. It's my home lake. I know there's fish that spawn there. I kind of give that thing a toss, and then I flip over, and boom, I ended up catching like a 20-inch fish off the same tree, and it was the female. So that was running through my head when I kept running back to that tree, where I lost the one on Rayburn. I'm like, oh man, maybe it'll set back up. Maybe it'll set back up. Maybe it'll show back up. That's probably why she's gotten as big as she did. She never made that mistake to go back. And if she did, she sure didn't touch my baits that I threw in there. And I switched it up 2 or 3 times, rotating through stuff to try to get a bite off that tree.
Yeah. I feel like I've been burned with bedfish, whether I can see them or not, multiple times.
Yeah.
But I feel like I've had situations where I've had a good first day and then tried to go back to that area. And I don't know if it's just the way that I'm fishing, and I'm fishing tiny areas and just beating them to death, kind of like you were describing. But I've had a number of times where I try to go back to an area on day 2 and I just don't do well at all, almost to the point where I hesitate to do it in a tournament. I've like gone the complete opposite, where I'll beat an area to death and I'm just like, all right, we're not going back there. We're gonna go somewhere else for day 2. Like, does that ever cross your mind, or is it?
Oh, absolutely. So on that night after day 1, I fished that same area in September for that tournament that the Hobie had. And there were winning fish there, but you just had to fish clean. And I didn't fish clean that tournament at all. Lost several big fish. So I knew the area had potential, but I knew you also had to be, really good about getting all your hook sets, getting all the fish in the boat, to really have a chance to cash a good check there. Because there's not a ton of big bites, but there's also not a lot of pressure. And that's what was attractive about the area to me, is I knew boats didn't frequent the area a lot. From the past tournaments and even in practice, I didn't see a lot of boats. Don't ever see a lot of kayakers over there. So it was attractive to not have to fish around a bunch of folks. I didn't want to have to do that. In practice, I also caught a 22.5-inch fish that was spawned out. I'm not kidding you. I got a picture of it on my board. And it was in 63-degree water, probably up there in about 1.5 feet, up on a cypress tree. So that's, that happened the Sunday before. And so I knew that there were already fish up shallow, and I knew that's what I was going to do. I'll tell you another big change I made from day 1 to day 2. I didn't even turn my graph on day 2 because it had rained, all night day 1, after day 1, Saturday night. And I didn't want it to mess with my head, the water temperature difference, because I knew it was going to be different. And I was used to fishing a certain water temp, and I'm like, I'm not going to turn this sucker on. I'm just going to go fish. I'm going to go focus on shallow trees and just see how many fish I can catch. Day 1 was really more of a swim jig bite to fill my limit. And then the big bite came from flipping. And so day 2 in my brain, I'm like, okay, probably need 100 inches to have a shot to win this thing. Maybe we need to stick to that flipping bite a little bit more. We'll try the swim jig bite. We'll go back to the same area and just see if, some of those bigger fish have pulled in, because I felt like there was a wave of fish, kind of coming and going. And I do think that's true, because Kelly Jordan actually fished the same area as me, but he was set out there on a secondary point, which to me tells me he thought there were fish coming and going. If he's sitting out there on a secondary point, he's trying to catch them coming in or going out or whatever the case is. and I was just focused up there shallow. But so for day 2, I started out throwing a swim jig, and dude, I cannot get a bite, and that's what I pretty much filled my limit with on day 1. And we had a front that pushed through. It rained, so what do? And when you're in the South and you got cold front, early, you pick up a daggum Cinco, man. And so I had 6-pound line on. It was actually a prototype fluorocarbon that Cortland had sent me to test out, and I just hadn't taken it off. I've been using it up at the river here to smallmouth fish some, and I was like, well, I guess we're gonna put it to the test today. We're gonna go skip some Cincos up on some trees and some bushes, and it held up all day. I did really well. I probably seriously in the first 2 hours caught like 30 fish. I mean, a lot of them were 12, 13, 14 inches, but I eventually got a pretty decent limit. I ended up catching a 19 and a 17 in the same area that morning. And then, man, I guess probably about noon or so, I really felt like I had just burnt that place to the ground.
Gotcha.
So,
Now, I want to stop you for a second because I'm curious. That takes some guts to have a new line of prototype, something that maybe you haven't spent that much time with, and to just have the confidence to roll with it. That speaks highly of that line or at least your confidence in that line.
I mean, I hadn't had any problems with it on the sharp rocks up there in the Ozarks where I go smallmouth fish. Now, granted, our
Gotcha.
smallmouth don't get anywhere near the size that you guys get in your neck of the woods. But I've put it to the test a little bit already, and it's done pretty well.
Okay.
So I was at least confident enough in it that as long as I didn't just have one wrap around the tree, I was going to be fine.
Gotcha. And we had talked a little bit before we started recording. I mentioned I kind of like that lighter line at times. I feel like I throw the Missile 48 a bunch, and it's a more buoyant bait. It doesn't have the same I guess faster fall that a Senko or one of those heavier salted baits will. And I feel like that lighter line maybe gets it down a little bit deeper, quicker. But it's something I've played with, even at places like Fork, where I feel like it's dumb to do that. It's very risky. But I've had it work. So I'm kind of like, it's interesting here, and it's almost like validating. It's like, all right, maybe I wasn't crazy to do that.
Well, another thing, you're talking about a super highly pressured lake, and there's no doubt, even though I didn't see a bunch of boats over there, some guys had probably run through there and practiced that week with MLF and the kayak guys. So I'm sure those fish have been presented some lures. And so I just think, if you can go down a little bit on one of those high pressure lakes to a lighter line, maybe get a couple extra bites, seem to work out.
That's awesome. And then were you fishing an area that was pretty thick cover, pretty heavy stuff? I know there's grass. You mentioned cypress trees.
Yeah, my area didn't have a lot of grass. It does in other parts of the year, but this time of the year, there's a couple patches here and there. It was mainly bushes and trees, cypress trees for the most part, but there was a lot of flooded or submerged bushes in the area.
Gotcha.
So it's mainly, kind of a big flat off of a creek, not too far from a creek channel. And I actually tried that creek channel some. I threw a Carolina rig in there. I flipped some of the trees against the creek channel, and I only caught one fish in practice doing that. So I didn't spend a lot of time over there in that main creek.
Gotcha. Well, I like the shallow fishing myself, so
Yeah.
I would have probably been trying to do what you were doing, something up shallow. And you said something else that I forgot to even mention, the fact that there was a major tournament going on at the same time. It was Major League Fishing. It's the Invitational Series, and I don't remember exactly how many people were in it, but I figure it's got to be at least 150 boats or
somewhere around there. I think the good thing for us, they cut down a little bit, throughout the course of their event. So
Gotcha.
I think like that last day, maybe they had 30 people out there. But one of the coolest experiences I've had on the water is, I'm over there flipping trees, and I'm, probably 600 yards from Kelly Jordan. And I literally have his Ducket Heavy signature Pro Series rod in my hand. And dude, I was kind of like a little kid. I was like, man, I really want to go there and talk to him. But obviously he's fishing for a pretty good check. So I kept my distance and, left the man in peace and let him do his work over there. But, it's also crazy how the world works in some ways too, because he ends up leaving the area and he goes around to the next creek over. And I didn't know that's where he went. And, I talked about at noon how I felt like I'd burnt the place, to the ground. Like I've caught everything up shallow that I think can help me at this point. I think if I just go back through there, I'm just going to waste time catching more 14, 15-inch fish. And that's not what I need. And so I go around the corner and I'm going to go back in that creek. There was a flat at the next creek over off that creek channel where I caught a ton of, small males. And I'm like, well, maybe some females have pulled up in there. And it takes me probably 30 minutes to get over to where I can even see the mouth of this creek. And I get over there and there's some trees on the outside. And I'm like, well, I'm going to go fish those and then I'll go back in the creek. And I do, and don't catch anything. And I turn like I'm going to head towards the back of the creek. And all of a sudden, here comes a boat flying out of it. And it was him. And, I'm glad that happened. And because in my brain, I'm like, oh, well, he already found those fish. He probably went over there and fished that flat. It's kind of an obvious spot. I'm going to go to plan C. And, had he never went in there and, come flying out, I would have never went and even tried to get over to this third spot where I end up kind of doing my damage at the end of the day.
That's cool. So, so you're going to plan B. You see him come out, and then so you didn't end up having to waste any time back in there checking it. You figure he's already done the damage.
Right. I figure if there's anything decent in there, he's already put a hook in his face at this point. So it's like on the plan C. And like I said, well, I didn't finish up that thought, but Saturday night, I'm on my phone looking at the map because I'm like, I need something else in the area, in case things go south or I'll run out of fish or want some bigger fish. And there was a third creek over, which was a long ways off in a kayak. And there was a creek channel swing coming from the main lake that hit up against a bank that had some cypress trees out on a point, and it hit it in two different spots. And I was like, man, that looked like it'd be really good. But if I go over there, I'm probably going to run to the mouth of the creek first and, kind of check it. So in the back of my brain, all day I'm thinking, man, I might need to go check that. I might need to go check that.
Gotcha. And then I tuned in. For anybody that missed it, you can go to the Hobie BOS Facebook page and actually listen to the whole award ceremony. But I was tuned in. Super Bowl was getting ready to kick off, but I had my priorities in order. I was listening to the BOS award ceremony, and you mentioned that late run, and then I saw on social media the nice sort of last minute catches that you had. So I'll let you tell that story, but I guess the short version is you made a long run, kind of a gutsy run.
Yeah. And, well, I tell you, dude, so Kelly Jordan comes running out of the creek channel. And, we just had a hailstorm that had hit. And I was trying to take cover under, some bushes and stuff, got as close to the bank as I could. And, there's lightning in the area. And, I'm like, oh, my God, I need to get over this other spot. But do I really need to go across the lake? I mean, at this point, the poles that were in the air would buzz. So I had all the poles flat, laid on the black pack. And I used, the little rod hooks on the black pack to crisscross and make sure, nothing was going to fall out. And, at that point, I'm like, well, you're going to die anyways. You might as well just go on and go across this sucker and see what happens. And so, dude, I put the EPDL on 5. And, just the EPDL by itself, you can get about 4.8 miles an hour. But then if you pedal with it, you can get, 5.4 or so. Dude, I was pedaling hard enough to get about 5.6.
Dang.
I was moving across that water. And there's a video on my Facebook where I'm like literally outrunning the storm. But it's crazy because in the shot, when I flip the camera around, you can see where I'm going is like beautiful daylight, clouds, it's like heavens are opening up over here on this other side of the lake. And that was where I was headed, wanting to go the whole time. And that's like the only spot on the lake that doesn't have rain and hail and lightning going on. So it was kind of like a finger just pointing, go over there, go there.
And then in the
So
background, you got the black cloud chasing you.
oh yeah, yeah. So I used the EPDL, outrun the storm, get all the way over to the mouth of this other creek, and dude, there was water coming in hard from the back because it had really dirtied the place up. And when we were there in September, I checked that area and caught a few fish off the trees in the mouth of that. And so even though it was dirty, man, I had to flip some of those trees just because I had caught some good fish there previously. And, you know, in my brain, even though I didn't have the graph on, I'm like, okay, this water coming in is probably a little bit colder. You know, we just got this rain. There was a front that came through. I was like, but somewhere over in this pocket, in this big cove, there's still clear water somewhere. There's got to be. And if it's still clear, it's still probably about the same general temperature, you know, that we had before all this happened. And so I remembered where I saw that creek channel swing on the map where it hit the bank, and I kind of glanced over my shoulder and I could see the cypress points over there. And you know, I kind of hustle over there and get myself over there. And by this time, it's probably 2:15 or so, and so I'm running out of time. I get
And
over there,
lines out is 3, right?
lines out to 3, and I flip up on a cypress tree, and dude, I jumped off like a 20-incher. And I mean, I set the hook, it come out, and just, you know, the hook never penetrated the bait. It was a Missile Baits. I ain't gonna tell you which one,
Oh
but it
no.
was a Missile Baits bait. Um, but that did kind of let me know there were some fish on these trees. But after that, I was like, okay, if they're there and I'm not getting a good hookup, I'm just gonna pick up a jig, because if they bite a jig, and there's one thing I can do, is I'm gonna get the fish in on a jig. So I pick up my signature jig, the G Money jig, one that I fished on fork with, and I went and hit every cypress tree around there. And I ended up catching like a 12-pound catfish at one point. Boy, I thought I won
Oh.
big bass there for a minute. And then I finally see this thing, and I'm like, well, that ain't going to help me. I caught a couple small 14 inchers. You know, I caught one that was 15 and a quarter twice. And I think that was my smallest one at the moment, you know, so it couldn't help me. And I'm running out of time, about 250 50 or so. And I come around the next point where there's some trees, and I flip up on one and set the hook, and boom, it's a 19-inch fish. And so I just kicked out a 15.25 for a 19-incher, essentially a 4-inch coal.
That's
And
massive.
dude, I was pumped because I knew in the back of my mind, because I went from not catching fish to suddenly from 2:15 to 3 o'clock, I'm catching fish. And I'm like, okay, if I'm catching fish, everybody else is catching fish. Like suddenly there was a, a bite at the end of the day. And so I was like, there's no way I'm going to be in the money if I don't get some coals over here. So I felt like once I had that first coal, I thought I was good, you know. And the truth is, I would have just snuck in, I think, with that. I think I'd have been in like at 170. And I think the bottom check was 169 or so.
Yeah, I was just pulling
So
that up, and they paid 14 places, I think.
14
Yeah.
places, they're paying
And
15%
yep,
this year. Um,
169 and a
so
half for 14th place.
yeah, so in my brain, I'm thinking people catching them, but I didn't know they caught them as good as they did that last hour. You know, because I'm like, oh, I'm probably in there, and I literally nosed the kayak over to a tree 10 feet away after I take my picture, I put that fish back at like 252. Very next cast up there with the jig, you know, I feel the fish pick it up and start running with it. And I go to set the hook, and one of the pinchers was gone on it. And I was like, oh,
Oh,
he just grabbed the pincher. He never grabbed the jig. I reached back, kid you not. I picked up that 6-pound line with the Cinco and skipped it in there on that tree. Boom, 18.75. I mean, that
no.
fish smoked it. But you know, I didn't want to throw the same bait in there. I wanted to give it something different as quickly as I could, and it worked out. And I got that fish in, and dude, I was so pumped. I mean, you'd have thought I just won the Super Bowl.
Oh, yeah.
But you know, because at that point I knew, you know, that I moved up to a decent check. You know, seventh place. Man, if you'd have told me after day one I had a chance to be in seventh place, because I was in 21st place after the first day, I'd have said, man, you're crazy. There's no way that's going to happen. But, you know, just kind of kept my head down, made adjustments throughout the day. and just kept fishing. But I've never had that happen where there was 2 of them in the last 10 minutes. I had
Yeah.
one literally in the last minute, that tournament that me and you fished at Chickamauga.
Okay.
In the area we were at, right there at the bridge, I only had 4 fish, and I
Oh,
caught
that
my
June
last
tournament a
fish.
couple years back.
Yeah, and I caught my last fish in the last minute and got a picture. Now that I got hype on that one too.
Oh yeah.
But never 2. Never caught 2 in the last 10 minutes to really give me a good push. So it was a fun experience.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I don't think I've ever had them that close. I've caught, the one in the last 5, and I've had like a 30-minute stretch late in the day where you kind of get on them and
Yeah.
you pick up a couple calls, but never like back-to-back massive calls like that. And you're 100% right. I mean, the standings were tight. These
Oh
guys
yeah.
always catch them. I mean, I'm looking at, there's only a couple inches separating a number of places here, and you're
Yeah, I
you're talking
think
a significant amount of money with
yeah, I
those
think
those two
even
fish.
with me, just thinking about my group that was called up at the same time, um, I think 10th through 5th place or so. Dude, we were all like right there by each other. I mean,
Mm.
I know Matthew, I think, was a quarter inch below me, and Brian Howe was a quarter inch above me. It was like quarter inches separating
Oh
people.
yeah, 174 and 3/4 for 5th place, 174 sixth. You're in there 173 and 3/4, a quarter inch down to Scotch at
Yeah.
173 and a half. 172 and 3/4. I mean, you're talking little bitty,
Oh, I know,
little
man.
bitty fractions of an
It,
inch, and
I
and
tell
you put
you,
up what 8 inches in calls in those between those two fish?
yeah,
Or is it not quite that
yeah,
high?
because they were both like 15-inch fish that I kicked out.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so it was big time, for me to be able to get in there. I'll tell you something else that really pays dividends in a 2-day tournament. And, I really taking your time on your photos, on even those smaller fish that I had on day 1. Like, if there was a chance to, angle the fish a little bit, to get that quarter inch, that tail touching that next quarter inch line, dude, you see that made a big difference,
Oh yeah. Oh,
and
I know exactly what you mean. Where
yeah,
if you can
there's
get
been
that fish to
times,
calm down and just let that tail kind of relax and get a little bit
yeah,
longer, or Hobie and Bassmaster, not every series lets you do it, but the ones
yeah,
that do, I mean, that pinch, it doesn't always make a difference, but sometimes it
yeah,
does. And if you can get a quarter, man, it's, what tournament? I think it was Fork again. I was in second by a quarter of an inch, and I'd have lost the tiebreaker. Um, I think that was 2021. Anyway, but I mean, the difference between first and second or second and third, you're talking a significant amount of money over
yeah, oh
that
yeah.
much. So yeah,
Well,
I completely agree.
there's been times in my early years where, I'm thinking that it's going to take whatever number to win a tournament, and I'm catching fish that are not the average that I need to get to that number. And I just throw them on a board like a 15-inch or something. And, don't take any time, just take a picture and throw it back. And then it turns out that it was a tougher tournament than what I thought. And, maybe I could have got 15 and a quarter. I didn't really even try to work the fish or, look at it real good. I was just in a rush. But taking my time, I think, on day 1, and even some of the smaller fish on day 2, I do think that pays off in these tournaments where it's real tight like that, to just make sure you can get the best photo possible to get your maximum length on some of those. And like you said, just let the fish relax a little bit, and it's easier to kind of move the tail a little bit when you need to.
Yeah, that's great advice. Another takeaway that, from me, just kind of listening to your story, and it's something that I find I make that same mistake you were talking about, where you have this number in your head. You see somebody with a big lead and you're 10 inches, 20 inches, however far back, and you just think, I don't have a chance. I'm too far back. Like, it's a 2-day tournament, and there's always movement. And that's something that I constantly see, but I kind of have to like beat it through my head,
Hmm.
because I'll find myself just sort of checking out, and well, I'm not really in it at this point. But man, you got to fish like you're in it all the way till lines out. And I mean, you proved it with those big calls that you had. And you never know that when, you know, like I said, it's a 2-day tournament. I don't know if you tuned in at all to the Harris Chain tournament, that for Hobie that kicked off the season, but the first day leaders put up insane limits. I mean, 113, I think, and
Yeah, I saw
107.
that.
I mean, and me, I'm just thinking, no chance. No, and of course I didn't have a chance, but I'm thinking, they're going to run away with it, and they struggle the second day. And you see, there were some guys. I think Dusty actually put something out. He was strongly thinking about going home. Had a decent day. I think he was in somewhere in the
Yeah.
80s, but he's you see your 30th or 40th, whatever in the standing, and you think you're out of it, but I mean he ends up cracking a top 10, having a good second day, and it just you're
Well, dude,
never out of it until it's
I'll
over.
tell you, I talked to my wife on the phone Saturday night, and I was kind of miserable. I mean, because I went down there to tent camp, and dude, the weather was terrible. And I was like, listen, I was like, I be honest with you, in my heart, like, I kind of want to come to the house, but at 83 inches after day one, I was like, me and her were talking, I was like, but there's a chance. It's like I've put up 100 inches in a Texas tournament before. I could go,
Oh heck
there's
yeah,
a chance.
back to
Maybe I
back
could
days
go
you
do
have.
it. So I end up taking everything out of the back seat of the truck and putting it in the tent and getting my sleeping bag out of the tent and put it in the back seat. And I slept in the truck Saturday night just because the wind and the rain were that bad. I mean, dude,
Oh
it was pretty nuts down there.
yeah, tent camping it can be more affordable, but man, when it's miserable weather, especially if you get
Yeah.
water coming into the tent and that wind whipping it around,
Oh yeah. I seriously considered just leaving the tent there.
just leaving it and driving
I was
home.
like, I told her, I was like, I think I might just leave this thing here. But by the end of day two, it never blew away Saturday night. It was still there. All my stuff was in there. Amazingly, it was actually pretty dry on the inside. Now the outside was a whole other story, but um, it had quit raining and dried out enough that I went and retrieved it before I ran to awards and all that good stuff.
Gotcha. Well, I want to pull up one more thing from the tournament. I got a note somewhere, something that I thought was an interesting fact. Uh, I don't know if you saw this yourself, but 7 of the top 10 finishers were Texas residents. I thought that was interesting. And
Yeah,
then of the other 3, you were one of them, Arkansas resident, another from Oklahoma, and then there was only one guy in the top 10 that was not either from Texas or one of those neighboring
yeah,
states. Jordan Westerman, I believe, Iowa. If I think I
yeah,
wrote,
yeah.
but I thought that was interesting, and I'm a little bit jealous. I've never been to Rayburn. I was really hoping to make it this year, and it just the schedule and it just didn't work out. But is there something different about the Texas lakes, Rayburn in particular, or just Texas fishing in general, that you think gives those local guys an advantage? Because I think it's something you see in some places, but not everywhere. Like the Susky, you'll see guys from all over the place doing well there, or other places that we visit. Um, you don't always see a field where it's the locals just, you know, taking everybody's lunch.
Yeah, man, I think it really kind of speaks to how strong of an angler pool they have as well. And there's a lot of good sticks in the region, and Texas specifically. There's a lot of good anglers down there. I mean, you look at that top 10, you got Brian Howell, Matthew Scotch, Jeff, of course, wins a ton of stuff down there. I think they have a really strong group down there, but their local series have been very competitive for years. It's not like kayak fishing is brand new down there or anything like that. They've been beating each other up for years, and I think just the time on the water down there goes a long ways. Experience goes a long ways. A lot of folks don't know, but I actually grew up in East Texas. So I was more comfortable fishing there than I was in Arkansas. When I first came to Arkansas for
Interesting.
college back in 2001, it took me a long time to get used to fishing clear water because I grew up in Texarkana, which is where the Hobie event for Wright Patman is going to be. And,
Ah,
the water down there can get dirty in a heartbeat. I mean, when you got rivers that feed, these smaller lakes in some of those areas. I was used to fishing muddy looking lakes. And then I move up here. My brother, ends up in Hot Springs, and we get in a tournament series doing Lake Washita, which is clear, 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 clear. Lake Hamilton, and some of those, dude, we got our butts kicked. We didn't know what we were doing. So it was definitely a learning curve for me to come here and fish. I'm comfortable when I go down to that East Texas region, Caddo, Louisiana, all those places, because that's just more of how I grew up fishing. So, you know, um, somebody posted one time on Kayak Bass Nation who the best or who the top 5 anglers in Texas. It took everything I had not to put my name on there. Like, go look at the results. If it's a Texas tournament, I'm there. I usually do pretty good.
No, I remember that ice. I don't know what do we call it, like the ice bowl tournament.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I think you were the only one over 100 inches both days, and you. I want to say I don't remember the exact numbers, but you pretty good hurting on those
Yeah.
fish when a
And
lot of guys were catching nothing.
I have, as far as big lakes go, I've probably spent more time on Lake Fork than any lake. I used to go there for spring break a ton. I know that lake so well, and it's been good to me over the years in tournaments. I've cashed a lot of checks there. Caddo is another one that, I had a buddy that his dad had a little lake house down there. We go down there in the summers, fish, have a little flat bottom here and there. So some of these lakes that we just go to, I'm just, feel super comfortable on.
So you
So
had the benefit of hitting Caddo before it kind of got introduced to the whole kayak
yeah,
world.
yeah. It's funny
Nice.
because I really did, back then being a kid, you just Texas rig a lizard and throw it on a cypress tree, and you catch a little 15-inch bass, and you think, man, you really done something. So that was kind of my experience before I learned a little bit more. And but it was always fun going down there. What was nuts is, dude, we used to jet ski and water ski in that place. And,
At
at the
Caddo?
time, I never even knew there was gators in there. And years later, I go back to fish out of a kayak, and I'm seeing all these alligators. I'm like, I can't believe that dude's dad was letting us out here,
Jet skiing?
water ski and jet ski with all these damn alligators. But yeah.
Dude, in the stumps, I mean, I
Oh
don't know,
yeah.
the stretches. I've been up the river a little bit in Caddo where it gets, you get some depth in the channel, but a
Well,
lot
and
of that
that's where
stuff
we
is
were.
flat.
Yeah,
Ah,
we were
okay,
up in the river. Yeah.
okay. Not running across the stump fields and
No, not like that. No.
all right. That's what I was picturing. But yeah, Caddo, I'll tell the story. I don't know if you even remember it, but the time that I first met you was actually 2021. It's kind of my first year doing the national tournaments, and it was at Caddo at the KBF National Championship. I think we were doing laundry at the same time, and we
Okay, I'm
chatted a little
trying to
bit.
remember.
And we chatted a little bit. Was I can't remember the name of the campground, but I think it was on the Texas side. I can't remember, but I remember we were chatting, and then yeah, I had what I thought was a really good practice. I was throwing one of those, big what is it? The brain is not working. It's not the ribbit, it's the top toad. I was throwing one of those with a
Yeah.
screw lock, and I was just having fish come unglued on it and then swim for 20 yards with it. And I thought I was going to go in there and just wreck them. And a little bit of a cold front came through, I think, and I just struggled that first day. You didn't. You caught them really well the first day. I think you had over 90. And I ran into you in the laundry room again. And you actually, you didn't know me from Adam. Like you literally met me the day before, and you were like giving me, hey man, I figured out I could just slow it down a little bit, pause it, and they were eating it,
Yeah.
and you just shared that with me, and I thought that was really cool, and I haven't forgotten that. So it was cool for me to be there when you got that big win, the Bassmaster win on
Oh
Fork.
yeah, man.
It was cool for me to be there, get you see that because I felt like I mean it, and not just you, like I wanted to highlight you, but I also feel like I've said it before, like there's so many good guys in the kayak world, and I like people that'll kind of give you the shirt off their back. Like we're competing and you're giving me info, like helping me out. And I feel like there's a lot of guys kind of in our space that are that way. So it's to me that's one of the cool things about the kayak space is it's kind of like a fraternity and guys look out for each other. We're
Yeah.
competing like it's cutthroat on the water, but then it's like everybody's cool and we talk fishing afterwards. So
But dude, part of the reason why I don't mind sharing is I talked about the struggle that I had, when I got to Arkansas, and we did it was called the Trader Bill's Bass Tournament Trail. And this is like 2004, 2005. And dude, we had guys that are now pros, you know, they were fishing that local series back then. Spencer Sheffield fished it with his dad, for
Uh-uh.
instance. And dude, they were winning everything. They'd kick our ass. And it's just like, but I would stay around after the weigh-in and talk to people. And some people would share things and some people wouldn't. But I was, making this little memory bank. Okay, we're on this lake at this time of year. This is what the event was won on. This is what most guys were catching their big fish on. And, it's like I was paying an entry fee essentially just to learn from these guys, and talk to them after the weigh-ins. And, after about 2 years of doing that, we got to where we were competitive because I was remembering things. But if those guys had never shared with me, and kind of told me a little something here, a little something there, I wouldn't be able to develop my own little toolkit of, pieces to pull out at certain times of the year in certain conditions. So that's why I've never really mind sharing, because, folks, shared stuff with me along the way as well.
That's cool. And I guess I'm a little bit out of order. I probably should have asked this to start, but I was kind of curious what got you into fishing in the first place. It's one of the things we like to ask guests is kind of, like I got the bug when I was pretty young and then
Yeah,
ended up in a
same.
kayak, kind of later on, but I wasn't sure if now you were doing boat tournaments for a while. You were saying
Well,
like
I did
competing against
with my
those.
brother. Previous to all that, so when I was a kid growing up, we had this pond out in our pasture. It was like 40 acres and a pond. And I had an aunt that loved to fish. And, I was probably 6 years old. She bought me just a little green fishing pole and she'd take me with her. And that's what got me hooked. And, I used to go out to that pond. My brother and sister would be over there playing horse. They'd be, throwing the baseball, whatever. And they try to get me to come over there. I'm like, no, I'm going fishing. No, I'm going fishing. So I was always like, I'm going to fish. Y'all do whatever you want to do. And then my mom's sister, my other aunt, ends up buying this lake that's in Linden, Texas, which, trying to think, it's not too far from Wright Patman, to be honest with you. But and it's probably like a 10-acre lake. It's pretty decent size. And dude, I spent summers out there in junior high and just with bass fish, with beetle spins, power worms, and then I got into spinner baits, got into flipping jigs later. So, I had grown up fishing, and then the football coach finds out, I played soccer, wanted to know if I could, kick a football, and ended up, start kicking extra points when I was in like, ninth grade. And by the time I'm in high school, next thing I know, I'm getting recruited to go kick footballs in college. And so I kind of put fishing away for a while to do this whole football thing. And, when I was kind of at the end of my college career, my brother had signed us up for those tournaments, and I'd do those kind of in the summer. Me and him would do some tournaments. But then he had kids, and he kind of put the fishing thing away for a while. And I chased arena football really till about 2014 was the last year I played. And
Okay.
once I was done with that, I just wanted something to kind of be competitive. And I owned a kayak and I kayaked fish, probably from like 2010 or so until 2017. I just go fun fish Lake Conway, fish the rivers, do this. I never knew there were tournaments. And one day I'm scrolling through Facebook and I saw something about a kayak tournament. And I was like, man, I'll check it out, see what's up. So I contact the folks putting it on. And I said, hey, listen, I got to coach soccer. You can see my two girls. Well, hold on. Back here in the back. So I was like, I got to coach their soccer games. But I'd like to fish the tournament. I just, won't be there till a little bit later. I can probably fish the first hour, then I need to leave, go coach, and then I'll come back. And I was like, would y'all be okay with that? And they're like, well, yeah, we're fine. But you think you can catch 5 fish? And to me, that was just comical. I was like, well, yeah, I can catch 5 fish. What do you mean? And no knock on anybody in that time frame and that day. I wasn't that good. Okay. And, I just had some experience that maybe some of these other guys didn't have yet. And so I go fish, and that morning I'm like, if I catch 3 fish, before I need to leave at 8. I'll be sitting pretty when I come back. So I go first spot, catch 3, get to the truck, head over to the soccer field. I forgot it was picture day. So what I thought was just me coaching a game turns into me rounding kids up to try to do pictures. So I'm there way longer than I want to be. I'm like, oh my gosh. So I was going to go to this one spot, clear across the other side of town at a different ramp, but I don't go because I'm running late. And I'm like, I'm just going to the closest ramp to where I'm at on this side of town. And so I do that. No one's there. The wind's blowing hard into a bank. I go over there with a jig, right? It seems to be a theme with me. And
Was that the
dude,
G Money or?
no, this was before that. I mean,
Okay.
this was before that we even came up with that whole deal. I'm just using like a black and blue jig that I bought at Walmart or something, and ended up having one of the better days I ever had fishing on Lake Conway. I lost a giant that still haunts me to this day. Um, so I get done fishing, and I call my wife, and she's like, well, "What do you think? How do you think you did?" I said, "Well, I lost a really big fish, and I'm just kind of thinking of someone else, fished cleaner than me. They probably beat me, so maybe I got third." And I show up to this LinkedIn. Never done one of these. This was old school, where you write on a card what your 5 best fish are, and then they take your cell phone and they verify it and look at your location and your timestamps and all that. And so there's a box for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I'm like using, a little bit of logic here and deductive reasoning. I'm like, okay, so I guess if you caught 5 fish, you put in the 5 fish box. And I asked this because there's not a single card in there. And I'm like one of the last people showing up. And they're like, well, yeah, if you would have caught 5 fish. And I was like, well, actually, I caught about 15, but here's my best 5. And I toss it in the box. And everybody's turning around and looks. They're just kind of like, who the hell is this dude? And I ended up getting 5 inches in deductions because I didn't have the mouth, pushed all the way up, like closed. Like, yeah, it was on the bump board, but it was cracked open a bit. I didn't know it was that serious. My first event, right? With 5 inches in the deductions, I ended up winning a tournament by 8 inches. And dude, I was hooked. Like, I was just hooked right away in kayak fishing. And, it was kind of a cool first experience. But dude, I was just in a sit inside paddle kayak from Academy Sports. I had 2 poles from Walmart and just like a bag of jigs and a couple swim baits. And that was it.
That's awesome.
No
That's
graph,
an awesome story.
just out there
Just
paddling
fishing.
around fishing.
I still love to fish that way. Just super simple,
Yeah.
little
Dude, I
bitty
went out that
kayak
way
getting
after
in
work
backwater
today.
places.
Yeah.
It's still a fun way to catch them, but I don't think I would have. Honestly, I don't think I'd have signed up for the tournament if I knew I was going to have to lose a chunk of time during the day. That is,
Yeah.
It's crazy that you had that amount of confidence that you knew you could catch them early, take some time off,
Yeah.
take care of the family, come back, and
Well,
still,
dude,
even
and
with losing how many hours, still
here's the
win.
deal. What still I can't explain to this day is how I was the only one that caught 5 fish. And like I say, I wasn't that good at that time. I think a lot of the guys had some catching up to do. But the fish were spawning. Like,
Gotcha.
it still blows my mind to this day. I think a lot of it had to do with the wind. Like, people were trying to stay out of the wind. And I knew, like, a lot of those bigger fish will spawn on the main lake. And, like, doesn't matter if there's wind there or not. Like, when it's time for them to go, they're going to go. I think people were more concerned about, kind of where they were as far as not wanting to be uncomfortable than
Shoot,
they
I do
were
that.
really focused on fishing.
I do that. I hate sitting out there and trying to fight the wind in a paddle kayak.
Yeah.
I mean, even in a pedal kayak, it's a whole lot better. But the wind has always been my enemy in the kayak. But
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you coming on. I
Yeah,
appreciate
man.
you taking this much time. And I want to, I guess I want to kind of give you the floor for a minute. If you got time, I'll go one more question first.
Yeah.
Wright Pittman. I know you gave a little bit of a preview talking to AJ at the awards, but kind of what can guys expect there? Is this going to be a big fish lake? Is it going to be you think a spawn deal, a post spawn deal?
It'll be post spawn.
Okay.
One thing about Patman is, dude, you can have so much fun and get so distracted catching hybrids, hybrid striped bass and other
Gotcha.
species of bass. I mean, there's so many different species of fish out there in that lake. It's just one of those lakes that's got a bunch of trash fish and things like that. But there are big bass that live in there. It's a very underrated lake. Doesn't get a lot of national publicity because it's not that big. The MPFL went there, and it was taking 20 pounds a day to be competitive. There's on the river end, there's a lot of bushes to flip, to pitch, things like that. There's some rocky areas if you like cranking and that sort of thing. There's some humps out in the lake as well for those live scoping folks. They're going to be out there doing that thing. So it'll be interesting. But also, that lake is very much driven by the amount of rain we get to where the fish set up. So we'll just have to kind of see how the spring goes down there and keep an eye on it a couple weeks leading up to that event. It would be my advice to kind of see how much rain they're getting, so you kind of know what the water levels are, because it comes up pretty quick, especially on the riverside. I call that the north end, but it'll be fun. Somebody will find them. I think I called my shot on Kayak Bass Nation, but I was probably being a little silly with that. I actually haven't been down there in years. But I'll get a chance to go down there and have some fun. It would be really cool to be able to do something special, at my hometown, home lake kind of area. Actually, I fished Millwood growing up more than I did Wright Patman, but they're somewhat similar in some ways. So I'm looking forward to it. I hope folks will jump into that one.
All right, you think we see the winning weight for this one, or winning length for this one, was 186 inches for Rayburn? You think we see a bigger one at Wright Patman?
I could see it, yeah. Especially if you could really target some fry garters that were still around somewhere. I could see someone getting up to 200 inches in that deal. So, if we were going by weight, it probably wouldn't be that impressive. A lot of these fish are probably going to be pretty skinny at the time that we're fishing it. But that's perfect for kayak fishing, right?
Oh, yeah, we like the long, skinny ones too.
That's right.
Well, dude, thank you again for coming on. I want to give you a minute, if you want to thank anybody, plug a sponsor, floor is yours, my friend.
Yeah, man. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on. I'll just kind of talk about some of my setup I used for this last event. I mentioned that I was throwing a jig and a swim jig. I was throwing those on the 7-foot duck it heavy, like I mentioned, the Kelly Jordan Pro Series. I think that's the perfect size for kayak fishing. It's not too long, still has a nice backbone. You can kind of get in and out of bushes and trees. So if you're looking for a good flipping rod, or even something to throw a swim jig on, check that one out. I think another thing that played a big factor, I run the Z Pro batteries. I just got the new EPDL. Being able to have something small and light, and not weigh down the kayak a whole lot, was very beneficial for me being able to make that long run that I did. Still had enough juice to get over there. Shout out to my man at H4 Outdoors just for getting everything rigged up for me. They have an online tackle shop. So if you're ever out at a tournament and need some stuff, he can get it mailed to you pretty quickly. Y'all check them out. So, of course, Old Town has been a partner of mine. Really loving the EPDL. Man, yeah, I don't think they played that boat up enough as far as, the speed that you can get with it. So I outran some folks from the ramp on day one. One of them kind of looked at me, was like, dude, what are you in? I was like, dude, that's the new EPDL. But yeah,
Nice.
But yeah, thanks for having me, man. It was a good time.
Definitely. I appreciate you coming on. Congrats again on the 7th place finish. And I look forward to seeing you, competing against you here in a couple of weeks on Murray.
All right. I'll see you there, man.
Garrett Morgan, ladies and gentlemen. All right. So we have reached that part of the show where we recognize folks who have done something cool in the world of kayak fishing over the last week or so. Whether that be on social media, whether that be through a tournament. And given that we spent a lot of time talking about this Rayburn event, I thought it was fitting that we recognize a couple of folks that did some impressive things at that event. So my first kayak king of the week is going to be Mr. Brady Stores, the reigning Tournament of Champions champion, or Hobie Tournament of Champions champion. I'm not sure how you're supposed to say that, but Brady put up the big bass for the tournament, an impressive fish, 24 3/4 inches. I don't know if I've ever had one quite that long. If you take a look at the pictures on Tourney X, that fish had some meat on it. It's a heavy fish. I would suspect that it was 10 pounds. If it was not 10 pounds, it was a heavy 9. So congrats to Brady. Impressive fish. I know there's some guys that were wondering if Rayburn would be able to crank out fish that were of the same caliber as some of those big fish we saw on Harris. And Brady showed that Rayburn definitely can. The other angler I wanted to recognize, our second king of the week, Mr. Guillermo Gonzalez. He does not need much of an introduction. Fantastic fisherman, Texas resident. He's got some very, very impressive stats in the state of Texas and all over the country. And he was a runner-up in this event. But the reason that I want to highlight Guillermo, it's kind of like, when we were talking to Garrett, he had a tough second day. He put up a really impressive limit on day one. I think he had 98 inches. I think that's right. But then he goes out on the second day and struggles. And if I remember correctly, so it's middle of the day, it's around 1 o'clock, and he's got a really small limit. And kind of like Garrett did, he makes some moves. He mentioned the hailstorm turning the bite on a little bit. He made some adjustments and make some huge calls late in the day to jump from, I think he was in check range, but he went from kind of bubble of check range to all the way up to the second place spot. Gave that leader a run for his money. So congrats to Guillermo, our second king of the week. And that's going to be our show for this week. Thanks everyone for tuning in to this edition of Kayak Fishing Weekly on the Serious Angler Podcast Network. If you like the show, check back next week. We'll have some more kayak fishing conversation. So until then, good luck, tight lines.